One way to make your book stand out is to take a well-known trope or story in your genre and put your own unique twist on it. Readers want the same but different. This is a weird thing that people have. We're comforted by the familiar. So we don't want the exact same story, but we want another version of it. Music has a similar twist. Places like Spotify have mastered how to create playlists of the same but different when it comes to songs. So today I want to talk about Fierce Fairy Tales, Poems and Stories to Stir Your Soul by Nikita Gill, How to Twist Tropes. What Gill does so well in this collection is she changes the point of view and morality of the fairy tales she uses. You can take this change in perspective and apply it to your own writing, to your own genre, to the tropes you choose to twist. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers. Because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. Let's start with how to make an old trope or story new. Perspective. When thinking about a well-known trope and how you can make it fresh and new, ask yourself, what if? What if the big bad wolf was just trying to save his pups? What if Cinderella was actually lazy? When I created my collection of modern fairy tales, When Magic Calls, I asked myself, what if fairy tales were taking place in our modern world? What would they look like then? How would the narrative change? In Gill's collection, she asks, what if fairy tales were about saving oneself and becoming self-sufficient, instead of relying on someone else to rescue you? This completely changes the stories she tells. Two of the ways she does this is by changing the point of view character and by changing the morality or the lesson of the tale. So next, let's talk about switching the point of view character. One twist on common stories modern readers never seem to tire of is making the villain the point of view character. We see this in Disney's Maleficent and all of the Joker and Harley Quinn recent movies. We also see this in books. In Boy Lost, she shows the story of Peter Pan and Captain Hook before Neverland, when the boys were young lovers. And by twisting and telling what happened before the narrative that we're all familiar with, it makes Peter appear callous and cold, and Hook appear to just be a wounded lover. This completely changes who the hero and villain is in that story. The Stepmother's Tale is another piece where Gill takes the villain and makes them the point of view character, and it completely changes your opinion and view of that character. In The Stepmother's Tale, we get to see the motivations behind the stepmother's actions, and they're not as malicious as you might think. Here's the end of that story. She is cruel to Cinderella because she wants to teach her in her own terrible, misguided way that life is not going to be kind just because you are pretty, and yet your beauty is your only true currency. If I can just teach you how to be cautious and cruel instead of so naive and kind, I can stop you from becoming yet another me. Throughout this piece, the reader learns of the hardships the stepmother has faced, especially after her beauty started to fade. Through these hardships, she experienced the cruelty and hatred of others, and learned to become callous and hard. She's trying to transfer those lessons to Cinderella without forcing Cinderella to go through those similar experiences. She's actually trying to help her. She doesn't hate Cinderella. She's trying to give her a better life than the one she has lived. Yes, she still went about it probably in the wrong way, but now a reader sympathizes with the stepmother, and she goes from being a villain to a misguided antagonist. Those are different types of characters and character motivations. If you choose to take a villain and make them the point of view character, Remember that most people see themselves as the hero in their own story. It's pretty rare that someone sees themselves as the villain. So keep that in mind when you're switching up this perspective. You can still do both. Just make sure you have picked a villain who truly sees themselves as a villain, not someone who wouldn't actually see themselves that way, if that's the story you're trying to tell. Next, let's talk about switching the morality or lesson of your trope. Another way Gill changes up fairy tales is not by switching the point of view character, but by switching the driving force and motivations behind the decisions that character makes. More often than not, she has her characters choose to stand up for themselves instead of waiting for praise or rescue from someone else. Here's how Gill does this in the classic tale, Rapunzel, Rapunzel. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, she began to rethink how and why she really let down her hair. For Rapunzel, it was realizing that no one who truly loved her would use any part of her body, not even her hair, as a ladder. No one who truly loved her would hide her from the whole world in a tower. So Rapunzel, Rapunzel, she cut off her own hair. She used it as a rope, climbed down from the tower, and ran away to find her own freedom, to make her own fortune, like a bird finally free of her shackles, without so much as looking back. Instead of waiting to be rescued, Gill's version of Rapunzel saves herself. She finds her own way out of the tower. But more importantly, she isn't just running from one bad relationship to the next. Instead, she's setting boundaries. This is a very timely lesson for today, when we're trying to break cycles of abuse and neglect and things like that in our society. Reading about characters who manage to do that is vital. So think about our modern morals. What are we trying to do in society today? What do we consider right and wrong? Now, when you've chosen your trope that you would like to twist, purposely make it align with today's morals instead of the original ones, or purposely make it not align with today's morals. That's one way you can make this old trope new and entice readers to pick your story. So, first identify what's right and wrong in that story, then identify what's right and wrong today, and see how you can change it up. Next, I want to talk about speaking your reader's language when sharing your twists on tropes. When you put your own twist on a well-known story, definitely use that story in your marketing efforts. Think of all the stories and movies called a Cinderella story. They're using that buzzword Cinderella to connect with readers who love Cinderella and want another retelling. So if you're using a popular story or trope like that, be sure and mention it in your marketing efforts. When you're doing this, remember to use reader language, not writer language. So a reader's not going to connect with a twist on the trope X. Instead say, what if Captain Hook was the best friend Peter Pan left behind? Or, a sassy Snow White flees her home after causing her father's demise. When you get specific like this with the story or trope you've used, you will pique your reader's curiosity. It's not just another Cinderella retelling. It's a specific type of Cinderella retelling, and you're hinting at what you have done to make this story different. That's going to be what captures your reader's attention. So here's how Gill does this on the back cover copy of Fierce Fairy Tales. Await no princes to save you, through their lips touching yours, whilst you are in unwilling slumber. Wake each other up instead. The first 3 lines communicate that this is a collection of fairy tale retellings. We have princes and we have unwilling slumber. We're all thinking Sleeping Beauty. It's the final line that shares Gill's twist. These are not your typical princesses who need rescuing. These are stories about girls who are going to learn how to save themselves. So here Gill is sharing her unique twists on these classic tropes. That's something that you can use in your own back cover copy or other marketing efforts, or just when you're talking about your story. If someone asks you what it's about, this is a great way to tell them. Last, I want to share why an editor recommends reading Fierce Fairy Tales. Fierce Fairy Tales is a collection of poems and short stories where each one offers a unique twist and perspective on a classic tale. In the 160 pages, you will get nearly 100 twists on fairy tales. So if you're trying to learn how to do this yourself, that's a lot of different stories that you can study and learn from in a short amount of time. If you're trying to master a technique or get exposed to lots of versions of it, short stories and pieces like this are a great way to do that in a timely manner. So this is a lot of shifts in perspective you can learn from. And just because someone has twisted a tale in a similar manner to you, doesn't mean you've done the same thing or you've copied them. In my collection of modern fairy tales, I take a changeling, the traditional villain of a fairy tale, and make them the main character. I also take the traditional Selkie story, Selkie Bride, and swap the gender roles. So I'm still switching the point of view characters, but my pieces are very different from Jill's, because I wrote them, she didn't. So you can do something similar to another author. You can have the same idea to write it from Captain Hook's point of view instead of Peter Pan's, and still write two completely different stories that readers will love. My approach was similar to Jill's, but not exactly the same. We as authors can learn from, be inspired by, and appreciate each other's twists, even if they are similar or completely different. So what's your favorite twist on a well-known tale or trope? Recommend it in the comments below. For more videos on how to make your stories unique and capture readers' attention, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. To find out more about me, go to www.ignitedinkwriting.com. There you will also find a revision checklist. This will help you bring out that change in perspective you're using in your unique twist. And if you want to learn more about how I twisted fairy tales, you can find my collection When Magic Calls at my author website, caitlinburvey.com, and most places books are sold. It's available in ebook, print, and audiobook formats. And now it's your turn to think about how you can take a well-known story or trope in your genre and change the perspective, the point of view, or the morality to ignite your ink.